Good Lord, we're back. What's going on, people? It's your brother Bleak. Welcome to another installment of Scarecrow's Chamber. Been away for a while, but it's no excuse. We're back. And today I would like to talk about, I'm going to step into the historical figure realm. And today I would like to talk about somebody who means a great deal to me. Possibly my favorite historical figure. Some of you may know who he is after I reveal the name, but it's a person who really inspired me to become a martial artist, someone who really inspired me to pursue a career in acting, someone who really made me look at philosophy in a deeper sense. I really didn't take too much to philosophy. I really didn't think much of it until I really understood and looked at it from a view that he pointed out through his interviews and just throughout his life. And today I just want to talk to you about a man known as the Dragon, probably the most impactful martial artist who ever lived, one of the great philosophers, one of the great actors. My personal favorite actor still to this day, even though he made a small amount of films because he died at a very young age. But I'm talking about Bruce Lee, Bruce the Dragon Lee. Some may know him as Lei Sun Long, some may know him as Liu Fan. But Bruce the Dragon Lee, I want to talk to you about today. A man who I've, idolized at a young age. I discovered at a young age, and it's just amazing. He passed away, 14 years before I was even born. And he had such an impact once I saw him on screen. And I believe the first film I saw of his probably was Fist of Fury, also known as The Chinese Connection. And there was just a VHS just lying around someplace. Those who may be too young to know what a VHS is, it's just a tape cassette. That's what we used to watch when I was coming up. Yeah, man, it had like The Chinese Connection, Fist of Fury on a cassette tape, and I watched it and I was just blown away from it. To this day, there's never been an actor that was able to capture all these nuances just in one setting, and he did it in a very intense sense. He made, just like Brett Ratner said, he made fighting entertaining. He made it fun. He made it emotional. There were just certain scenes where, like, I believe that he could have been a great silent film actor because there were just certain scenes. There was, just like he said, you got to keep the dialogue down to the minimum. And I believe that as well. It's possible to tell a story with very, low dialogue. We see it all the time. Sometimes they are, motion pictures that are very dialogue heavy. And you really have to be well engrossed with the dialogue to understand where the story's going most of the time. But with Bruce, it really wasn't like that. He told his stories mainly through just his motions, through his movements, with his emotion. It were just certain things that he didn't even have to say. You just knew what he was thinking. You knew what he was feeling. And one of the moments that really captured me the most when I watched his films, it was when he often would dispatch a man or, just take out. You could just see this expression that he would make. It was sometimes, what I take away from it is just that he's saying to himself, I didn't want to do it, but it was either him or me. And like I said, in his features, it was always a fight to the death. It was always just one who had to be left standing. And he would often quote from the Hagakure, the way of the samurai. To learn to die, to liberate yourself from it is to not fear it. And that was the philosophy that he really adapted to his life. He was the first person that I knew of that really grasped the limitations in certain systems. Of course, he started in Wing Chun when he was 13 years old. He started in Wing Chun under the tutelage of Grandmaster Yip Man, a very well-known instructor. And he said to one of his friends, Danny DeSanto, we owe our knowledge to the Wing Chun, but we have to go beyond it. And he was also an average fencer. I believe his older brother, I forget his name. I believe his brother's name was Peter. His older brother Peter, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. He was a fencer, and Bruce got into fencing, became an average fencer, and of course, he did a lot of boxing in the street. Growing up in Hong Kong, he grew up on the rooftop, what they call gong sao matches on the rooftop. They had different. Like, Hong Kong in the 1950s was a very, very tough place. I mean, there was a lot of course, there was a lot of Chinese who fled the mainland to get away from the communist regime to go into Hong Kong to live more of a freer existence, more liberated life. So Hong Kong was kind of flooded in those days. Had over 3 million people there. This was in the 1950s, so that's a lot by that standard. And there was a lot of clans around. You had the Chow Li Foot clan, you had the Wing Chun clan, and they would engage in these rooftop battles. And Bruce was very sure of himself, and got into a lot of fights. Got into trouble a little bit at an early age and stuff like that. And he took down this one kid. I believe he was the son of a high-ranking police officer in Hong Kong, and that's when his father, sent him to America, to stay out of trouble. And when he got to America, he made a stop to Seattle, and that's where, of course, he met his wife Linda, and that's where he opened up his first school, and while attending the university there. And while in America, he also encountered another martial artist by the name of Wong Jackman. This is a very well-known story. Wong Jackman was a part of this. It was a group of traditionalists in the Northern California area who heard about Bruce, because Bruce did not look at people because of their race or their stature in life. If you had an intense interest in the arts, he would teach it to you. He never looked at people differently. He treated everybody the same. But of course, all of the Chinese traditionalists in those days, they were referred to foreigners as the Guai which means foreign enemy, I believe. And it was a problem for them because they felt that Bruce was just giving secrets away and all this stuff, and why would you teach our culture to the enemy? But Bruce didn't see it that way. Bruce saw that if you have an intense interest, then I will teach it to you. So that's what he did. But Wong Jackman and a group of these people challenged him to a match, and if Bruce would have lost the match, he would have to stop teaching non-Chinese. And based on the story told by his wife Linda, Bruce, she was there pregnant with her son Brandon, which is kind of extraordinary because Brandon, that's my real name. So that's one reason why that's another reason why I always kind of felt connected to Bruce, because he named his first son, my name, which is so. But anyway, I digress. But Linda was there, and she was there to witness this. And she said it took Bruce 3 minutes to get Wong Jackman on the ground and say, "Do you give up? Do you give up?" And after that, Wong Jackman and all those guys left. But she said Bruce was very down on himself after the match because he felt that he should have been able to take Wong Jackman down much sooner. And that's when he started to question and reevaluate, his knowledge and what he learned. So he had to expand and come up with more methods and more strategies to, be more of a complete practitioner. So that's what he did. And he came up with, as we all know, as Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. And it's just amazing that, this way of thinking that he had to expand, to never limit yourself to one particular style. It was a revolutionary way of thinking. It really was. He really was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. But even though he wasn't the first to put all of these different things together, in fact, back in 1947, Kajikimbo practitioners were the ones who put all these different systems into one title, Kajikimbo, which means karate, jutsu, judo, kempo, and boxing. Chief Imperator was the one practitioner who stayed behind in Hawaii and prolonged the teachings while the other practitioners went over to Korea for the war. So Bruce wasn't the first to do it, but it just just to have that way of thinking, that revolutionary way of thinking, saying no one style is the best. It's best to have a little piece of everything. And of course, that way of life, it really inspired what we now know as the UFC today, and a lot of Dana White prefers Bruce as to be the father of mixed martial arts and all that stuff. And it's truly amazing, man. And the biggest thing that I take away from Bruce, even to this day, was just his mental stability. It wasn't really much of what he can do physically. I mean, obviously, what he can do physically was amazing. The two-finger push-up that he demonstrated at one of the Long Beach, international tournaments at Parker International. The two-finger push-up, the one-inch punch, and when he was demonstrating that stuff. Before that, Americans weren't aware of really the Chinese arts. It had mostly knowledge of Japanese influence because of soldiers would go overseas and they would go to Korea, Japan, countries like that. So it was more karate being taught to the Americans and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, I would often have these talks with one of my grandmasters that the Japanese and the Koreans of that time, they intentionally taught the Americans backwards. For example, when you see katas in these tournaments today, they're doing them backwards. And of course, like when you block, they're going forward. But realistically, when you block, you wouldn't go forward, you would go backward. So it was just little things that I would always question. And of course, my grandmaster told me that stuff, but that was how it always was. So when you go to a tournament and you do it, the traditional way, where you wouldn't score for that. So that was one issue. That was one gripe that I'd always, took with me and stuff like that. So it was very, very hard for me to deal with. So I mean, to this day, I really don't do katas much anymore. But I still like to, go through, the basic principles of how to defend and all that stuff. Which is because, like I said, it starts with the defense. It's all about defense for me. Once you learn how to defend, the offense will come. But the thing about Bruce didn't really have any passive blocks in Jeet Kune Do. His strikes were his block. He said, to reach to me, you have to move to me. Your attack gives your opponent the opportunity to intercept you. So it was a structure where you would strike and block it simultaneously. You had the capture and the strike. What Bruce would do, he would capture and strike at the same time. It was a simultaneously move. It's different motions, but they're all a part of one motion. So that's the way he would teach. And I remember Master Bob Wall, rest in peace, recently passed away. Was a good friend of Bruce. Some of you may know who he is. He played some of the villains in Bruce's films. He played Ohara in Enter the Dragon, and one of the other bad guys in the Way of the Dragon. He was a good friend of Bruce. And he said Bruce didn't want to really teach beginners per se. Of course, if he did, he had some in his own schools. But he took the top martial artists and he felt that he could make them better. For example, martial arts legend Joe Louis. Bruce worked with him. He also worked with Grandmaster Gene LeBell, and did he work with Master Bill Wallace? I'm not sure. I know he worked with that Parker. I mean, just all of the top big name martial artists of that day. Of course, he worked with Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was a good friend of his as well. Worked with Jim Kelly. Just all of the big names of that era. And Bruce is just, even to this day, is just such an impact for me personally. Man, I know he means so much to a lot of people all around the world. For example, in Bosnia, he was used as a symbol of ethnic diversity. And one spokesperson said, we will always be Croats, Serbs, and Muslims, but the one thing that we always have in common is Bruce Lee. So it's just the impact that he created is monumental. It really is. And the tragedy of it is that he's not here to really see the impact that he created. I mean, he was able to see it a bit, when he went back to Hong Kong. It's crazy. When he went back to Hong Kong, he was heavily revered because of his portrayal of the character Kato. that he played in the TV series Green Hornet. A lot of people may look at it as a kind of a Batman kind of ripoff or something like that, but I enjoyed it, even though it only lasts one season. But I enjoyed it. People didn't really care about Van Williams or anybody else who played the Green Hornet. Everybody cared about Kato more because it was just Bruce's delivery. It was something that wasn't really seen in Hollywood ever. Because of course, during Bruce's time, Hollywood was very, I guess you could say, discriminatory against Asians, and of course, African Americans and stuff like that. And he had an idea. He pitched an idea to the studio for a show called The Warrior, and it was he wrote the treatment for it, and he pitched it in, and unfortunately it didn't work out, and they turned it into a series called Kung Fu, and they gave the role to David Carradine. You may know David Carradine as he played Bill in a few of the Kill Bill films, and it was just that time. It was just very close to impossible for anyone of color to be backed by a big studio like that. I mean, I guess they just felt lucky enough just to be in a feature in Hollywood during those days. So Bruce decided to go back to Hong Kong. And when he went back to Hong Kong, he was heavily revered by the people of Hong Kong. They didn't call the Green Hornet show the Green Hornet. They called it the Kato show. And he was just heavily revered. And that's when he met Raymond Chow, and Golden Harvest Studios came forward to him with an idea to make films. And that's where we got all the big films, The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Into the Dragon, and Game of Death. Unfortunately, that he didn't get to finish, but the footage that we got is out of this world, man. I mean, just his on-screen persona. He was smart enough to create a persona that was just, you could not duplicate what he did. And also he had a background. He had a dancing background. He was a 1957 Cha-Cha champion. So when you see him on screen being very light on his feet, you could tell that he put a lot of his dancing background into his footwork. And he also was a big boxing fan. He had a right foot forward stance, so he would look at boxing tapes, but he would watch them in reverse. And then, he watched boxers like Gene Tunney, Jack Dempsey, and Jack Johnson and stuff like that. And he had very, very good boxing footwork. I think he really revered boxing footwork because it was constant movement, and it was constantly changing. And you could see that in his film. So just the way he moved, it was just so I can't even explain it, but it was just out of this world. And it took to me at a very young age. And of course I love what I saw, from a visual standpoint. But when I got a little older and I heard his interviews, particularly the Pierre Berton interview, which is probably his most popular interview, his most famous interview, because other interviews, they really focused on Bruce's physical ability. But in the Pierre Berton interview, he was able to convey the thoughts that he had, that he would always write down. And just, he was the real thing when he compared, Kung Fu to water. Who does that, right? He would break it down by saying, Kung Fu is the strongest substance in the world. It appears weak, but it can go through a solid. You cannot grab it, you cannot punch it and hurt it. Whatever you throw water into, it just adapts to it, to the apparatus. Like, for example, when he said you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. It becomes the bottle, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow, drip, creak, or crash. So, and that's teachings that could be understood by a young child or a master. He modernized philosophy, because, like I said, philosophy goes back, centuries and centuries, thousands of years. But he modernized it and made it mainstream. And his delivery on the screen, it really, really conveyed that. And I believed, and I personally believe that's the reason why he had the philosophy that he had, because he wanted to show people that martial arts, it's not just X's and O's. It's not just going out taking somebody down or learning how to do somebody in. And this was something that he learned from Yip Man. It was more of an internal battle. martial arts really teaches you about yourself. At least that's how I take it. It teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you to diffuse a situation rather than to escalate a situation. That's why I took up the studies to begin with, because I hate fighting. I don't want to fight anybody. So the highest defense is to not, engage into a battle at all. And that was the one thing that he was, say. He would say, the less technique that you have, the better that you would be. Meaning, if you don't allow your adversary to start a fight, then you will be successful. And that's the highest form of defense, is not allowing a fight. But if it should get to that point, then that's when you distribute what you have learned. But you should always have what I like to call a defensive mindset when it comes to that, because especially dealing with people who are constantly trying to test. Unfortunately, martial arts, it sometimes breeds a lot of people who just wants to show how tough they are, and they test others. That's the cons of it. But luckily, that's not the majority. The majority of martial arts are very, very humble, very calm, very down to earth people. Like I always said, a white belt is more dangerous than a black belt. And what I mean by that is, white belts don't have any control. They don't know their own strength. They don't know their own stability mentally. But when you become, a master, you have all that. You mastered the basics. That's what my grandmaster used to tell me. You mastered the basics. And the test is to not use it, what you've learned, that's the ultimate test. It's not really going out there and testing your skill. I mean, obviously you want to test your skill through spars and stuff like sparring, like something like that, which is something I heavily endorse. I endorse, full contact sparring. And as a matter of fact, I'm looking for, some studios here in New York that I can get back into, regardless of what it is. And that's the one thing I always say. The one thing that kind of buzzed me a lot about, the art in general, was that you have all these practitioners that want to put their arts up against others by calling people out and say, oh, this art doesn't work. This one doesn't work. This is useless. This is not practical, stuff like that. And in a lot of ways, it's some truth to that. But me personally, I don't like to call out other, systems and other structures and say that this is useless. To me, there is something that can be taken away from all styles, all, structures. A lot of people talk down about Aikido. They talk down about, Krav Maga and stuff like this. It's just certain things that I hear that I just don't appreciate. There's something to be learned from everything. But most people, I say to people, well, I don't say it to people, I say it to myself a lot. But you don't view the art in sequence. You view it in principle. For example, in Wing Chun, I follow Master Francis Fong of the Wing Chun Institute, Wing Chun Academy, and he, I follow him on Instagram, and he, does a lot of videos where he instructing his students, and he shows the sequence, like what a lot of instructors do. They show the sequence, and people look at the entire sequence and say, "Oh, that you cannot do that in a real setting." Well, that's because they're looking at it in sequence. But when you look at it in principle, you have to break down the sequence and say, "Okay, this is applied here. This is applied there." You have to look at it in principle and not the whole sequence, of course. Because like I said, realistically, a fight lasts 2-3 seconds for a person who really knows what they're doing. But back to Bruce, and I'm closing up my time here. But ultimately, Bruce Lee is, he's my favorite actor. He's my favorite philosopher. He's my favorite, martial artist. He heavily inspired me to, do what I do now. And I'm still chasing this dream to become an actor here in New York City. It's going to take some time, but I'm never going to give up on that. Martial arts has always been a very true love for me, and it's really, really molded me to the person I am today. And I have Bruce to thank for that. And I still watch his films to this day, over and over and over again. And when I hear about the stance that he took before making Into the Dragon, originally, a lot of people don't know. Originally, the film was originally called Blood and Steel. And they moved on to maybe calling it Hans Island, where Bruce read the script and he was not pleased with the script. And he told producers Paul Heller and Fred Rydstrom, who was friends of his back at Warner Brothers. And they called him up, wanted to do a film with him. And Bruce wanted to put more meat, if you will, into the script. I mean, the action was going to be there, but he wanted to put a little bit more of his philosophy into it. And when you watch the film, for example, the scene of Lao's time, when he's talking to the student, he tells him to kick him, and he's talking about, pointing the finger at the moon and stuff. That was a scene that he wrote. And when you watch Into the Dragon to this day, the most memorable scenes are the scenes that he wrote. I mean, for me at least, I really hold those scenes dear. In that particular scene, I mean, just the start of the film, where he's going up against Sammo Hung, another martial arts legend, another legendary actor, one of my personal favorites, Sammo Hung. And he's talking to the kid, and it just, obviously when you see it the first time, you're not gonna really understand what he's saying, but then you break it down when you watch it over and over and over again, and like I said, it's just timeless. Philosophy is very, very timeless, especially when you can convey it in the way that he did. He really, really simplified it. And even if you don't understand it fully, that it's valuable. You know that it's valuable because something that can be understood very easily, sometimes we take it for granted a lot of times. But Bruce made you think. Not to be all brawn, but also, have, obviously, even though he was a physical specimen, when you see pictures of him, he was 100% complete in shape. But I think that the muscle that he worked the most was the muscle between his ears, his brain. And that's one thing that I really revere about him. And props to his daughter Shannon. I follow the Bruce Lee podcast that she hosts. And I'm very proud of Shannon and the work that she's doing, prolonging her father's teachings and, really doing him justice. So shout out to Shannon for that one. Bruce, like Bob Wall said, we just had to be thankful that we had him for 32 years. And I wish we had him longer. But just be able to have so much of an impact and do the things that he did in such a short life. It just goes to show you, man, like, you are your own anchor, really. And, no pun intended, I'm here on Anchor FM. But you are your own anchor, man. Nothing can stop you except you. And people always, tend to call on some divine being to give them strength. But what people don't understand is that you have the strength in you from beginning. One of my favorite wrestler of all time, Bret Hart. I gotta do another episode about him. But he said, life is not really about so much on what you've learned, but about what are you able to project into the world from what you already have in you from the very beginning. And I believe that. And that's what I get from. That's what I take from Bruce, man. It's just self knowledge. Self help. He really made self help years before it was even a thing. Nowadays it's all about self help, but he was doing this in the 60s, 50s. But yeah, man, I'm coming up on my time here, and I just wanted to just put my 2 cents out there. I mean, I know Bruce has a lot of fanatics, not just myself, but Bruce, if you were listening, I just want to thank you for helping me be the guy that I am, be the artist that I am. And I will forever follow your teachings from here until my time is done. And thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who are listening here on Anchor FM. And I'll see you next time.